it's out of time. I think King of Comedy is just, there was probably never, even in the 70s, this would have been, you know, the anti-hero and all, it probably would have been more accepted, but this film's sort of out of time and place, as is Rupert, you know, a character like that. I think he's forever kind of lost. Scorsese had, I think, the failure of this film, he had a tough 80s, like a lot of people I was saying, you know. But I think that's probably one of the reasons maybe for the film's, I don't know if it's commercial failure or lack of identification, because it does a funny thing, this movie, that you don't see in Taxi Driver or Raging Bull or any of the others, or most movies actually, where this movie could have been made 100% from Rupert's perspective, but it really does open itself up to Langford's perspective. You know, every time you make a movie, you have to think, whose point of view is the movie? Well, this is unique, and I think that's what Scorsese brought to it, because he felt himself in both characters, and he had achieved a lot of success by then, so he and De Niro both could relate to the striving, obsessive, will do anything to succeed, you know, person who hadn't achieved anything. But then he could also very much relate to the person who's kind of famous and who's seen as made it. So I think he was both characters. But the film takes that point of view, and it's kind of, it's in a way deadly, I think, because you judge Rupert. Like if you think of Taxi Driver, you go into Travis Bickle's mindset. You see the world and everything from his perspective, and you agree with him, and you so identify with him. You never jump outside of Travis, because then you would say, oh, this guy's maybe, he's a psychopath. I mean, you would lose that identification, where this one allows you to sort of lose and judge Rupert in a way kind of more from Jerry's perspective. By representing Jerry so much, you sort of judge Rupert from his perspective, and it's not good, you know. It's kind of like, oh, this guy is kind of, you know, he's not trying to be a reality star, he's trying to be a comedian, you know? And he seems to know a lot about the history of comedy. You know, he truly loves it. All the things he says, you know, he's talking about Sid Caesar and Mel Brooks, and that's like someone who knows comedy. No, he wants a career, clearly. He's asking what's his real motivation. He wants to, I think all his fantasies make that clear. He truly wants to be the king of comedy. He wants to be one of those guys. You just feel like he's a guy who doesn't know how to get ahead. He wants to leapfrog from aspiration to stardom. It's an intimate space. Yeah, Rupert's space is never, except the little, you know, his little room in the basement of his mom's house or whatever. He's on streets, he's, you know, it is cluttered, but his fantasies, he's in an intimate, you know, restaurant, an office. That's his ideal world. I think you have to buy your way into that, you know, so. He's a fan. He's a fan. A little deranged fan, but I mean, yeah. Celebrity culture's always been, you know, a thing. I think if you go, the history of Hollywood pretty early became a celebrity culture, but it's funny just to see how it's changed and kind of metastasized, I guess, over the year. This is 30 years ago, and that's a, you know, yeah, what's the difference between, where does talent fit into celebrity? You know, that's what's different. The celebrity obsession back then was at least it was people who did something. The psychotic element was there were so many people left out. Maybe the good thing about our modern media world is everyone's kind of we're all living that Warhol 15-minute, you know, you can have your own show on YouTube. Everybody's kind of more in on it, so maybe there's less frustration. Back then, you know, there were the haves and then everybody else. I don't know, it's a celebrity culture that could make a, I mean, he didn't kill anyone. It was kind of, it's one of those human interest jokes that might actually create that kind of, you know, Taxi Driver has a very similar ending when you find out Travis is kind of, what, the New York Post or one of those has made him kind of a hero, and he's sort of a local, you know, he's been elevated into the public, you know, media world. So I don't know, I kind of think it's real. The famous laugh track, is he getting those laughs for real on the show, or are they just turning up a knob, you know?
Yeah, right.
But the scattered applause and like, it begs the question, is that real, or did... Yeah, but you know, this movie, everything's kind of real. His fantasies are real, you know, all these fantasies and everything he, you know, Carson took these long vacations from the show. Someone would take it over for 6 weeks. You know, all these are kind of real. That's, yeah, I think you can argue all that is, where does the fantasy end, or how real is any of that?
Yeah.
That's a great performance. That's underrated, I think. Well, but yeah, just her tone, like the way she feels him out, you know, it's like, guess who I was just, you know, talking with? Your shrink? You know, like she doesn't really trust him, but he kind of slowly pulls her in. What Jerry tells him in the car is really very true.
You have to work.
When he says, you know, it's an old hackneyed expression, but you kind of have to start at the bottom. And, you know, it's funny how Rupert cuts him off. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm 34, I just want to get to the good stuff. I don't really want to play clubs. You know, famously, Scorsese wanted Johnny Carson to play Langford. It's obviously written for him. Even they used the biographical, The Time You Got on Par, you know. And this was written in the 70s, and so it's hard to kind of think about today when there were really only 3 networks. I mean, Johnny Carson was God. So the attitude toward this, you know, it's very real to that time. Johnny Carson was so, they really wanted him to play the part. And I think, I heard that, I mean, thought about it, but he was actually afraid. I think he had stalkers after him a lot. He thought he would be killed. He just didn't want to go there. And so they started thinking of Dean Martin, who had a show, and other people, but they settled on Jerry Lewis, which I can't imagine anybody else now. Yeah, because he is funny, but then you get that anger, you know, underneath that, there's that simmering just, and that was apparently one of his bigger improvs, was the incompetent, you know, when he's explaining his motives, and if, you know, he's trying to talk himself out of the situation, but they said, you know, that was all him. That's how he felt about, you know, you got to feel sympathy for him in that, oh yeah, he's this big star, but yeah, his life is kind of, he's got his own, he's in his own prison, you know, in that way. So Zimmerman talked about his you know, linchpin for the script was he saw a documentary on autograph hunters, and then he thought the stalker, there's celebrity stalkers, and then there's autograph, how they're similar. You know, someone who stalks someone for their autograph isn't that much different than someone who stalks them for other reasons, I guess. Yeah. So how that feels kind of dangerous. It's not strange love. It's not like everybody's in on this joke. They're kind of in their own worlds. You know, the people who work on the show, you know, Shelley Heck, and, you know, everyone's in their own, they all have different agendas. The very last shot is different. He's in red. The way that suit is really, he just hears his name over. That's just, that feels like more of a,
see, why would that be? Why would
he's not saying anything, they're just saying his name over and over? I mean, what kind of show is that?
I feel like that was